I wanted to welcome everyone to Level Up and how to protect your business from cyber threats. My name is Jody Jankowski. I'm the CEO and founder of Blackline IT. I've been in the IT business ever since I was about 12 years old. Believe it or not, my dad started a software company in the 70s, and we used to build our own computers, write our own software, and essentially help out small, mid-sized businesses since the kind of the dawn of the microcomputer age. I started my own business out of college, and I've been doing that ever since. I've been Blackline IT is about 30 years old now, and so I've got a lot of background to help companies that are small and mid-sized, and mid-sizes, you know, anywhere from or small as 20, 10, 20 people up to about 400, 500 people. It's about the size of businesses that we cover. So we've got a lot of background, a lot of experience in this area, in this field, to help kind of dovetail into this really interesting topic of cyber insurance, because they really go really hand in hand. With that, we have a special guest with us today, Mike Bulow from the Bulow Group. He's cyber insurance expert, along with other business insurance expert. And I want to just let you introduce yourself, Mike, to the rest of us.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Mike Bulow, president and co-founder of the Bulow Group. We, similar to Blackline, middle market P&C brokers. So what's middle market? It's essentially anywhere from the 20 to about 500-600 employees, and then different sales accordingly. So one of our areas of expertise is cyber liability insurance. Definitely a growing industry, or a growing segment in our industry, excuse me. So I'm excited to be here and just have a conversation on it and see if we can, just bring light of what's going on in the current marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Since it's a very dangerous time right now when it comes to cyber insurance. Cyber threats.
Cyber threats.
And cyber insurance is just one of them. So today we're going to cover these three main topics: why cyber insurance is important, what cyber insurance is and how it works, and then what underwriters will ask, what they'll look for, kind of the steps to take, and then we'll have examples. We'll talk through some metrics. Really, we want to look at it from the perspective of not just the technical aspect, but really the insurance heavy reasons why you want to use both a technical solution and a cyber insurance as kind of a way of protecting yourself.
Right.
We're also going to start with a polling question. First question is, what brings you here today? So I'm going to launch this, and you should see that on your screen. So the poll is open right now. If you wouldn't mind answering this question, it really would help out Mike and I as we drive through this, to really know what's on your mind today. Yeah. So 5% of the people that we've got on the call here have been a victim. Sorry to hear that, by the way. That's I'm sure that's been very difficult for you. All right, Mike. So could you tell us, what is the general state of cyber threats in today's business climate?
Right now it's basically gone from the big box stores, the big names like your Targets, your Home Depots. They're the type of companies that I think brought awareness to the subject. When those first happened, everybody was in shock of, wow, that's crazy. They took them down. But now it's trickled down to your everyday company. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter how big or small you are now. It doesn't matter if you take credit cards or you don't. It doesn't matter really what level of business you are or what industry you're in. Cyber crimes don't discriminate. They don't care. They want to be, there's people out there hacking for different reasons, whatever it may be. Personal vendettas, I can't answer all that. There might be a lot of different things. Money is, of course, the biggest. People, they want to make money off it. So the current landscape is, it's changing. I would say weekly, monthly, definitely annually. We're seeing it just on the insurance piece of the measures that we need to take. that companies need to take. So
Yeah.
right now, it's kind of a long answer of it's affecting everybody to some capacity. And so it's really important right now to just make sure you know what threats you have as an organization and
Right.
how to mitigate it.
Yeah, we see the same thing. It's we saw the same, that it was first the big targets, the big money was where most of the attention was of the cyber criminal. That has definitely come down into the small mid-sized market. The companies that we work with and service every day are the ones that are the most lucrative attacks. And we'll back into some of the more technical aspects of that, but the small mid-sized business is a ripe target because at times the sophistication level of the technologies and the disciplines around IT is lower than the big guys. The big guys got a lot of budget.
Yep.
The smaller companies don't have those kind of like deep pockets that throw a lot of money at cyber protection. So we see the exact same landscape. Can you give some real world examples for everyone of some cyber attacks that you've seen specifically? I've got a few, but I want to hear from you that you've seen in your industry right now.
Yeah. So I mean, we have clients amongst so many different industries. We have had. I'll give you an example. One is a manufacturer, paper products manufacturer. All of their machines, they run 24/7, and they make custom print jobs. Well, those custom printers, I mean, they're massive, they're huge.
Right.
But those are all ran on computers. Well, a hacker hacked into the system, shut down it, and they did it like third shift. So it was in the middle of the night, causing chaos. They knew what they were doing. And
was it a ransomware attack?
It was a ransomware attack.
Okay.
Yep. And then they, shut down the business. There's been a business interruption, lost revenue, the repair of getting everything back up and running, paying off the hackers to unlock it.
They paid the ransom?
They did pay the ransom.
Right.
So that was one right there. I mean, it's just a manufacturer right here in Chicago. And that's just the one location. I mean, great company, great business, but that had happened. So that was one. And then we are seeing, I had another one. I'm trying to hit different industries because one was a contractor and essentially someone had hacked into their emails and were just watching what they're doing for about 30 or 40 days, who they're invoicing, who they're sending it to. They're emailing Jody and then Jody sending back, invoiced money. Well, then all of a sudden the hackers, maybe the fifth or sixth time, jumped in, made a phony invoice, and it got paid, and that money was gone. So that was kind of two different ones. One shut down actual operations, one transferred money to the wrong people.
Gotcha. We've actually seen the exact same types of attacks. So there's the ones that interrupt business and the ones that, like you said, interrupt, bring down systems, prevent you from operating, and then then there's money to be paid, either as ransom or to a company like ours to restore your stuff back to a state.
Right.
That's one of the examples we have is that there was a client got attacked, had ransomware, came in through one of their people. We'll talk a little bit about ways to protect yourself on that, but came in through a link, clicked the link, sent ransomware through the organization. We were brought in to remediate it after it already had happened. Luckily, we had backups. We had all the data that was needed. And what was lucky for this one organization that it happened on a Friday and it gave us the weekend in order to restore everything.
Oh, good.
Now, that was just dumb luck. If that would have happened on a Monday and they would have been down for three days or 2 days, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, sure.
And then we had one with a phishing attempt. Same thing. Email. They think that they're talking with somebody at a high level. They call it a whale fish. Thought they were talking to the CFO. One of the managers was talking with the CFO to transfer money to one of their suppliers. But they had been watching for a while, like you had mentioned, and that turned into a huge breach of close to $800,000. It was two $400,000 breaches. Like went up to, we didn't get that money, send it again, and they sent it again.
100%. And that's, I mean, at the end of the day, they're good. They're good at what they do. I mean, of course, it's highly illegal what they're doing and everything under the sun, but it looks very legit and believable, the things that
they're criminals.
Yeah, they're criminals. I mean, this isn't some like, I hear it a lot from when I'm talking to clients about cyber liability. is, well, I know the difference, or this, you'd be surprised how good they are and how
Very
hard it is to
sophisticated,
do
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting better and better and better, and the technologies are lagging, which we'll talk a little bit more in the technology section. So let's talk about some industry data on the subject. I'm going to share my screen again here. Excuse me. So right now, just under half of cyber attacks target small businesses, and 60% of those businesses are out of business within 6 months. That's also not, that's real data. If you lose, third bullet point there, 200K in a small business, that could be not only out of pocket money, it's also the money that you might have to pay. And we're going to talk about some things which are covered in a second. But there's a really good chance that, and there was a story of an HVAC contractor that had transferred money out of their account through a phish and it put them out of business. They couldn't go back to the bank. The bank wouldn't reimburse them for that money. It was the decision they had made. They had no control over it. And it basically put them out of business because they transferred a large amount of money out of their bank account.
Right.
So it's real, and it does, and this is data just from the small business size, and this is, Mike, this is some of the data that you got that's overall what's going on.
Yeah, so it's just a global, giving you on a higher global scale. Average cost, 3.86, so just under $4 million. Average time, which is crazy to identify and contain it, is over 6 months, so 280 days. And 59% of people are getting affected. Healthcare is the number one. We have some other ones, professional service, software, public sector. It seems like they're going after the companies that will truly shut them down versus maybe the ones that can go and still continue their job and not be completely affected.
Right. Okay.
All right.
And then this last slide, can you explain a little bit more about these direct and indirect costs?
Yep. So basically, when we look at it, the indirect cost, as you can tell, is actually a lot higher than the direct cost. So when we talk about the direct, it's what happened, how much did we have to pay, do we have to do, and we're going to talk about this a little in the back, the notification costs, credit monitoring. Okay, this is what had happened, here's how much it cost us. But it's those indirect, or as I call them, soft costs, that you just don't see. Business interruption, extortion costs, employee time. If you're down for 1, 2, 5, 10 days, whatever it is, well, your employees are still getting paid. They're still there, not being probably productive if their systems aren't working. So those are kind of where the indirect and direct, but the indirect always outweighs the direct in these attacks.
Gotcha. Any questions here from everyone on the kind of the general industry, background? I guess if I was to summarize, it's important. It's happening to companies of all levels. These are sophisticated criminals. They're not just what used to be, bored teenagers in their basement, which are just messing with us.
Right.
These are now nation states and criminal organizations, which, you spend some time looking at people's emails, and then you can get a $10,000 payday like that. Very hard to find. Very hard to track those people.
Right.
And the FBI is not spending a lot of time with companies that are smaller or have got a smaller, I'm gonna call it a smaller breach.
Right.
They just don't. Excuse me. They got bigger fish to fry. We're talking people getting millions of dollars. Is happening all over the country. The smaller company unfortunately doesn't have a whole lot of leverage.
Right.
All right, so next is another poll question before we move into the how and why. So we're going to ask here what your perception of cyber insurance is. Don't know if it's even available. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
I mean, a big one like, didn't even think that was something I could do.
Right.
It's too expensive. The process of finding a provider is difficult, not applicable to my business. We don't keep credit card information, so
right.
It's not something we need. Or it could be a valuable addition. I've heard enough about it, and there's a lot of what we're talking about is in the common, call it discussion that's going on.
Yeah.
That's going on today, but it's also still a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
coming up on half. Could be valuable,
Yeah.
obviously. That's why you're here.
Mhm.
Didn't know it was available to me. All right, good. I'm going to close the poll here and share it. Too expensive? That's also very valid. I mean, that's as an IT company, we had went through the same process. Believe it or not, like we just look like another company, even though we're in the business of
100%.
IT.
Yep.
Thankfully, our price was a little bit lower because we have some of the things that are, that they're going to be asking for, which we're going to talk in the third section. All right, let's talk now. Let's go into some of the key value propositions. All right, so Mike, what are some of the key value propositions of having cyber insurance?
First and foremost, your financial risk of losing money from a breach.
Those are like direct. That's like direct
cost.
Direct
cost.
Somebody takes $200,000 out of your bank.
Right.
That's a financial.
Right. The financial. And then we talk about your reputation as well. One of the biggest things with cyber liability insurance is that there's a lot of laws and regulations should a breach occur that many people don't know about. So outside of you getting breached, you owed the $200,000 example, but you had, let's call it 1,000 records that were compromised. We have to go and actually notify those 1,000 records that there's been an action, if you will, an attack. And so there's a lot of, again, those soft costs or indirect costs that you might not think of that come into play.
Okay. And also, you kind of mentioned this before, which is operational risk. So there's direct financial, there's indirect, and then there's also just general, I'm just called operational risk.
Operational, yeah, we call it business income. So that's in the insurance world, it's called business income. So your lost wages, your lost sales, your downtime, et cetera.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, so the cyber insurance is really going to be addressing those
Correct.
main components.
Yep.
So what are some common components then? So let's talk about some of the detailed, almost like levers that are in the policy itself.
Sure.
But talk about some of those.
Yeah. So you have your limit, which your limit is, okay, we have a claim, $200,000. We're going to pay, and that money's gone. Okay, so it's going to pay back. Let's call it black line, for example. And then we're going to have the business interruption component, which would be we're down for 3 days. It cost us X in payroll, X in sales, and soft costs that had happened because of it. So that would be another component. Also, we have the forensics team, which will go in and say, how did this happen? Where did this come from? So that's another component within the policy. Okay. These are all sublimits.
So like you said, you're down for 3 days. That was $20,000 in payroll.
Correct.
It was lost revenue of $100,000,
right.
That kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
But with limits.
With limits, correct. So the breach is the one limit, and then we have your business income, which will have a limit. It'll all be spelled out in the policy, and those you can move levers on those limits. If you're saying, hey, this is a bigger risk because it'll shut down my entire operation. We can mess with those limits and make them accordingly. And then the biggest thing too is your public relations. They have to go back and say, Blackline is a great company. They have to go get their reputation, basically reputational harm. And there's a limit for that, which would include marketing and hiring a PR company, which the carriers will do.
Let's use a different company besides Blackline.
Yeah.
Let's call it ABC Corp. ABC.
Yeah, what's the different one? ABC Corp. And so it'll come back and do that. And then also, as we had discussed too, with the records that were compromised, they have to go back and offer credit monitoring and things like that to make sure that if I gave ABC company my information, they have whatever it is, federal ID number, social security number, whatever records they have of mine, they were compromised. Well, someone has to look over those compromised records to make sure that those weren't compromised as well themselves.
Right, so there's forensic data around all of that.
Correct.
And those are professionals that cost money.
Correct.
So then your policies are going to pay for that. Correct. What about in public relations, obviously? How about other professionals that typically have to be involved?
Other professional, I mean, attorneys have to get involved, right? And also too, these policies can include, and a lot of them do, that we work with the carriers. When your extortion costs, so if you do pay the extortion up to a limit, it's covered, reimbursed back. But again, they're going to bring attorneys in, and they're actually going to have the attorneys full time. They have them on staff that negotiate that. So if that happened and I had to pay $50,000 ransom, well, they would bring in an attorney to really negotiate and make sure that's legit, because who's to say pay us 50 grand and then, oh, we didn't turn it on, do it again, you know, like now you're done. Now you're just basically getting hacked again.
Yeah, you get
another
hacked,
hack. So they do bring in professionals to act on your behalf.
And be sure that that's
Correct.
being done right.
Correct.
Cool. Which of course all costs money, which is why, you know, not having to come out of pocket for that kind of thing.
Right. And they have those resources on staff or within, they have their vendors for that, which is really important.
The insurance companies?
The insurance companies.
Okay, so you get like, you know, kind of already vetted.
Yep.
Say they know exactly how to do this and we work with them, so
correct.
You know that it's going to get covered.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Correct. Which is really good, because who, you know, if this happened, first off, your head's not in the right mind space anyways, but now you're trying to find vendors that,
especially when you're under the gun.
yeah, you have no idea.
You have no, like, you could be in a down situation and you got to move fast, because the more the insurance company is also, I'm assuming, is incented, right? Because depending upon how long it goes, they have to come out of pocket.
Correct.
So they're going to be incented to help you out.
Correct.
What are some examples of events which are covered and not covered, like things that you've seen in the real world?
So we talked a little about like some of those claims examples, manufacturers, contractors, et cetera, coverages that we've seen. I mean, we've actually had people get funds transfer fraud up to a certain amount, and it had been covered under that policy. Those are like phishing schemes. So we've seen those. Those are, I would say, probably more relevant than most right now.
But you've seen, you know, with the clients that you represent, people actually submit claims and get paid on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what.
Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing we don't really see covered, if you will, is if it was obviously intentional, that will never be covered. Also, if it was a situation where you're transferring money voluntarily, you know, if it's kind of like, oh yeah, I know I did that and I approved it and I did this and this. If there's a lot of steps taken, the other thing too that would not be covered is if there's anything factual inaccurate on like the application that you filled out.
Yeah, which we're going to talk about when we get into the application side.
Perfect.
So have you seen claims or portions of claims denied?
Yes.
And so what are some things which have not been covered?
Things would
like
not
you
be
just kind of mentioned.
Yeah, kind of mentioned it. It's not so much the claim wasn't covered, it was the fact that the controls weren't in place to cover the claim, if that makes sense. So a client put on their application, we have MFA, and they don't, and there's a claim, and the carrier was able to deny it, because they basically have inaccurate information.
How about we had maybe it wasn't data that was, maybe it was data that was compromised, or we sent W-2s unsecured or something like that. Is that something that typically gets covered or not?
Yeah, it would be. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. It would be covered, because I mean, if it got, you know, in the middle of you sending it from your email to, let's call it, your accountant, if it got hacked, it would be covered.
Okay, as long as the insurance company can be able to validate that was
correct.
That was correct. Okay. Premiums and limits. So can you talk about some typical? I know this is a tough one for insurance people. You know,
that's all right.
We're all on the same boat. Everything is different. Every risk profile is different, right? But let's help everybody kind of understand, because especially one of those responses was it's too expensive.
Right.
We don't know. Like, is it 10,000 or is it 100,000? We have no idea what insurance like. Can you explain these?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There are going to be a few factors. What industry you're in? Okay, so if you're a bank, it's going to be a lot different than if you're a manufacturer. Okay, but how many employees you have and what your sales amounts are. To give you an idea, let's call it $10 million sales account has 30 employees. Average premium for $1 million policy would be anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 annually. And then I'm thinking accounts that are less sophisticated, less records on hand, maybe a little less in sales. I mean, we see them as low as $1,500 for $1 million policy. And then I keep on saying
$1 million policy, like million in total, with all the little pieces.
Correct. Or it'll be $1 million cyber, and then it'll have the little pieces on top of it. They'll stack on top. So it'll give sub limits that will stack on top of that $1 million limit.
Gotcha. And you had mentioned it earlier, which is you tweak those levers a little bit, right? Depending upon each organization. Because the risk profile is all different. Like we see clients all the time, the closer, and actually this kind of jumps into the next question, which is what businesses tend to be more at risk than others.
Yep.
And we've seen that clients of ours, that the revenue generation of their business, the closer that is to the technology, the more interested they are in protecting it. What I mean by that is like the company that, let's say in this insurance agency, every day, all day long, those computers are generating money.
Right.
They're cha-chinging all day long, right? That's what's generating revenue. That's different than the contractor, the construction, the person that's, I can go out and make money even if my computer's not working. So the risk profile is just a little bit different, and that's going to make a difference.
Yep, exactly. Right. Exactly. It'll make a difference because then they're looking at the business interruption. Use the contractor example. If they're out in the field, it's obviously going to be a complete headache back at the office getting all the back end stuff fixed, but they can still go out and do their job.
Right, like taking orders manually instead of using their iPad.
Right.
Then taking those handwritten invoices, then entering them in later.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that a policy would cover.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. Any questions? Let's take a look here. I think maybe there are, before we move on to the next. Who requires it? If it is a private company, who is enforcing you to search through all your electronic records? Oh, I think this happens to do with what does the law say about having your data compromised?
The law, if I'm understanding correct, so the law is
like say, who is enforcing you to search through all your electronic records? Meaning, if you have your data compromised, I'm thinking that's what this question is from Keith. Is it law?
It's state and federal. Yep. State and federal will come in and they'll say, okay, how many records have been, and that's what they'll bring in the forensics team to say, here's how many were breached, and here's who they are, and they really narrow it down to, who that person is. And I'm sure, or I would assume, a lot of people have actually probably gotten those emails from a Target, a Home Depot, et cetera, saying, we've had a breach, we're crediting your credit monitoring, et cetera. So, but it is all federal and state.
Okay, yep. That's regardless if you're under any kind of compliance organization or not. Like there's just a general.
Just a general breach. This happened.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Here's another question. What percentage of companies do you think have MMSA? Do all carriers require them? We're going to answer that in the next section, actually. Yeah, well, both questions. Keith and Sean have got questions on MFA. We're going to answer that in the next segment. So let's move on to the next piece, which is what underwriters look for. And this is where it's a little bit more technical. We're going to talk about that next. So I'm going to ask another poll question, which is, what is your confidence level in your organization's, let's call it security preparedness right now? That will help as we talk some more and get into this next section about what they're looking for. And just in general, the primary objectives of an underwriter is to assess risk, right?
Yeah.
They're just like literally, it's every insurance company ever, right?
Yeah.
That's why they got actuaries. They pay them these gazillion dollars, is because it's all just about risk management,
right?
That the propensity, if you have, let's call it some condition in your whatever, your building, your business, your finances, your whatever, you're at an X more percentage of being a claim.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And all they do is just apply that to cyber.
Exactly. Same thing.
Cyber components,
exactly,
if you will.
Right.
60% right now of people who have voted, it's in the average to low. We've got a couple of in the high category. So most people are in the average to low. Don't feel confident or not. It feels so-so. You got some things working, but you think you might have some gaps.
Yep.
And that's just this is, once again, this is a confidence level. It's more why I think everybody is here today, is to kind of understand that. All right, so here's an example of what underwriters are looking for. So we're going to talk about four main sections, I guess, of what they're looking for. They're going to look at technology, policies, procedures, compliance, and then business and financial information.
Yep.
And why it's important to break these out is it's not as simple as saying, you know, hey, what technologies do you have?
Right.
That's one component, right? What technologies you have, but this area of cybercrime and cyber technologies, it's such a moving target, and technologies are rapidly advancing. The technologies advance and the threats advance,
right,
very rapidly. So these underwriters want to know not only what do you have in place today for technology, but also what's your policies and procedures on those same technologies.
Right.
Right. They want to see that you're, you know, that you're maintaining your systems.
Mm-hmm.
What I think of is I think of like fire insurance. I know that's probably not how you guys think of it, but
yeah,
I think of fire insurance. You go into that business, and when you first wrote the policy, it was, hey, look at these sprinkler systems, look at your electrical, look at your HVAC, the way that you guys do things. They're being maintained. Everything is great. 3 years later, they come back and they're like, you've not even certified your sprinkler system since the time we wrote you.
Right.
You're not. Your electrical is out of date. You put in 3 other machines and they're not up to spec. You got a major fire hazard here. It's similar with technology.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's 100%.
So there, and here's some other examples of in each of these different sections. So technologies, firewall, antivirus, backup and recovery, multi-factor authentication. So let's do a little sidebar on the MFA for right now, because what we found from the in the technical area of the business is that MFA is probably the best protection method you can apply when working with your systems and preventing unauthorized access to your systems. Right. And I believe the insurance companies out there agree with us.
They do. They do. I would say a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, MFA was not required. Now 9 out of 10 carriers require it. There might be a few outliers that may not be up to speed yet, but MFA. And then backing up, maybe we're going to chat just real quick on like layman's term, what is the MFA?
I was just going to kind of
explain that. Just what is that, because I feel like I'm a MFA expert, but it was
probably new.
It wasn't my choice. I had to.
So multi-factor or two-factor authentication, yep. You might heard of two-factor. That is, you have a password is one factor, and then you have another device or method as a second factor or multi. So that would be like a code sent to your phone.
Yep.
Those are probably the most common. Everybody, sees that.
Yep.
So there are codes that you can send to the phone, or there's also applications that can be purchased. One that the problem with just having a code sent, I know I don't want to get too detailed here, but some of that can be spoofed now.
Sure.
Right. So having that code can be intercepted and spoofed. There's another version of that that's an actually application that says that's also communicating securely that says, yes, I'm allowing access to this system.
Perfect.
But it's my password and then this other authentication method. Some of the really hardened systems out there have another one. There's a device, there's a card. Mm-hmm. You have to have something plugged into your computer. That is really providing security. So it's like, oh, I have a password. That's factor one. Factor two is a code gets sent. Factor three, I've actually got to have a physical device.
Yep.
So that is by far the best for any kind of external access. And side note, if you've got systems that allow that, you want to use it.
Yep.
Policies and procedures. I don't want to overlook this. This is a big one. Do you have the underwriters are asking and need to know if you have these in place because it's really important. Do you have media and content controls that are in place? What's your policy for when you post something on your website or in your Twitter or your Instagram or your Facebook, whatever it happens to be, LinkedIn? This is a real thing. A client posted an image the most, like, just picked an image off the internet, put it on their website, had it as part of a blog post. They got contacted because there's companies that all they do is look for copyright violations,
Right.
and said, this image, you have to prove where you got that from and that you're licensed for it.
Gotcha.
Now, cost them $2,500, but then you also have to pay the attorney, then you had to blah, 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 blah.
And your time.
And your time, that's like a, $5,000 to $10,000 mistake because somebody just built a blog post, copied and pasted
Right.
An image. And so those are the kind, they want to know, like the insurance company wants to know.
Yep.
Do you have a third-party policy?
Right.
Policy for third-party access. This is how the big guys, like you were talking about, the Targets and the Home Depots, they didn't get compromised directly. They got compromised through a third-party vendor.
Correct.
And that was how they backdoored.
Correct.
So the underwriter wants to know, what's your policy for how third-party vendors access your data system?
Right. What's your policy and what type of limits do they have? Do they have cyber insurance and the risk transfer agreement between you and your third party?
That's a great example.
That is really, really relevant right now, is third party. When you talk about social media, there's so many companies, that you farm that out to a company that specializes, and you have all these specialized accountants, your temp CFO, and you can just imagine all these different, branches on the tree that are getting access to your systems and email, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, another one here. How is your private or sensitive data defined and managed? Another one, you just think, oh, I just store this data on my system. It's in a file. It's fine.
Right.
Again, underwriters, what are they looking for? Risk. Where is it at? Is it in a database? Is that database encrypted? Does that database have multi-factor authentication to be able to gain access to it?
Right.
Like they're going to want to know, where is that data and how is it managed?
Yep.
Right? And you need to be able to answer what that is and how you, as opposed to, I don't know, they're in spreadsheets.
Right.
Someplace on our network, and our network is password protected. I mean, it's not that it's not good enough, right? It's more of a question of that's different risk.
Correct.
Than the company that stores all their data into a database that's hosted in a system which is encrypted, that the only way to get access to the data requires multi-factor authentication.
Right.
Okay, now you're in a different ball game in terms of risk.
Yep, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's how everybody on this call should look at it. They should see this as not just a moment in time, right?
It's always a moving target. It's always going to be a moving target, and just like you said, you might have a password. You might do it this way, but maybe this way will actually protect you that much more. So it's not that you're doing it wrong or that you're not doing anything. It just is at the absolute best. Is that the gold standard?
Right, and there's going to be obviously there's going to be an effect not just on your coverage and limits, but also on the price.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly is business and financial information. They're going to ask the typical things, right? How much money do you make? What kind of assets do you have? What kind of entity type are you? They want to kind of understand who are the players, right? It's a S corp versus C corp versus LLC. Who are the people involved?
Yep.
And do you have any breach history? Another.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Yep.
Or if there's one current, that's another kind of game.
That one's a pretty upfront answer. Yes or no. So.
Right. All right. So lastly, before we kind of wrap things up,
first and foremost, everybody's at risk. First and foremost, everybody's at risk no matter what. And I don't care what industry or what size, it does not matter. And I think we expressed that today. And number two is, I think you should hit cyber insurance, cyber threats head on and get your IT company involved. And I just think it's so important because it puts you as a business owner or a key employee in a position where you can sleep at night, but you know that, okay, I might have some doors open, but we can at least get them shut and quick in the right way. So always get your IT company involved. One of the things that I feel like I see from another lens as a business owner is when I hear a company we're talking about cyber insurance and they say, I've got a guy on the side, a buddy who does it. I'm not saying that person's not good, but it just seems too loose, right? And it just, are they keeping up with the ever changing? We talked about a lot of things today. If we did this a year ago, I don't think we would be hitting on a lot of the subjects, MFA, et cetera. I think next year there's going to be a whole different ballgame of things that you need to look out for. So it's just always a moving target. So get your IT company involved right away. And I say involved of, hey, we need to go through our application for the cyber insurance. Let's go through that. What does this look like? Explain, what is that? What is this? You know, how does that affect us? And then from there, just like you said, hit it head on and kind of embrace it, because it's going to happen anyways, you know, as far as the threat, and let's just try to mitigate the risk as much as you can.
Yeah, and I would, I mean, from our vantage point, the sophistication level of IT organization is very broad.
Mm-hmm.
This is just kind of a sidebar on IT, the IT market. You just mentioned there's a lot of, at least what we've known about the industry, there's a lot of single proprietor IT companies out there. And do they have people dedicated to just looking at cyber attacks or security on its own? It's moving way rapid. I would agree with that. And it appears that if that application is not filled out accurately, that there's some they've just exposed themselves to actually more risk.
Right. Well, whether it was intentional or not, usually it's not intentional. If that application is completed and it's incorrect, and let's just say you answered a question incorrectly, and that's what the breach or the cause of the breach was, that is grounds for a denied claim. So those applications are very, very important, because that's how we come up with the quote, the pricing, the limits, the offering, if you will, the policy. But what good's the policy if the information is not correct and ultimately it's not covering you? So it's really, really important.
Yeah, one thing I would point out, like when we were looking at that application, that kind of version of that application, that was a great representation of the best practices that every organization should follow. So when we come into organizations to evaluate their technology, especially in the topic of security, that's almost like that's our checklist almost of what are we protecting our clients of, because we've seen all of it. And that's the reason why insurance agencies are doing, or insurance companies are asking the same questions.
Yeah.
That's where the bad guys get into.
Mm-hmm.
Even going through the exercise of getting, I just would throw this out there, because it's two. There's two really great benefits to the business. One is by doing it with their IT team or with their IT provider, as well as their insurance agent, right, like yourself. Yep. You're leveling up your game to protect your business,
right?
Because it doesn't hurt you to say, oh, how many doors do I have open in my building, right? I thought that door was locked. Yeah, when was the last time you checked whether or not that door was actually locked, and somebody can just walk right in?
Right.
And it's not just technology, by the way. I just want to kind of point that out. We do security training, and 90% of the breaches that occur come through people. It comes through them clicking on that link. It comes through them being duped.
Right.
There are sophisticated methods being used to con us, and that is part of what they ask for. Is, do you have training? Do you do regular training? In a lot of compliant industries, you have to do training. You've got to do training twice a year,
right? Or
at least once a year. And once a year is too long. Just good for people to be like, just heighten everybody's kind of awareness. That's all. It would just be a hard target.
Yep, exactly. Be a hard target.
Be a hard target. And if the underwriters see that, you're going to pay less and you're going to be better protected.
Yep.
It's really what it comes down to.
100%.
See, we've got some questions here while we wrap up. How are we supposed to know the appropriate insurance limits and deductibles for all the categories on a cyber insurance policy? So is that like a question of like what's appropriate? Like what's appropriate for your business?
Sure.
Right. So
yeah, it's a great question. When we go through that application process, there will be a few questions regarding records, number of records. For example, like we insure car dealerships, their records are insane. There's so many records. So like we'll go with the underwriter and we'll say, okay, here's the client profile. Here's how many records they have. Here's the different policies, procedures that are enforced. And then they'll recommend a limit, but will also come with a few options. And typically those options will be, I don't want to say no-brainers, but kind of no-brainers, where you'd say, wow, the difference between 1 million and 2 million is only X, or between 1 million and 2 million is, wow, way more than I would have thought. So a lot of it will come down to comfort level, but we'll make our recommendations based on the application, i.e. the records and controls in place.
Gotcha. Hopefully that hopefully that answers that question. Because I would, one of the greatest challenges I've had as a business owner is not knowing what you don't, what you don't know.
Right.
And hate to say it like this, but you don't want to risk being sold, right? So it's like, do I really need a $100,000 limit on a specific line item?
Exactly.
Right. My assumption being that that's your job, right? Is to guide and say, based on your industry and your size business, yep, you should be in this range.
And that's what we'll do. We'll say, without disclosing other companies' names, we'll say, the majority of our clients, and we have these metrics in your industry, are purchasing this. We recommend this, but we'll never upsell you. It's basically, here's the options, here's what we think, and then ultimately it's your choice, because there will be some self-risk at a certain point. Even if you have the highest limit, there's still a risk of going over that limit if it's a massive, massive claim. So our job is really just to educate you, bring our recommendation, and ultimately you make the choice of your risk profile and tolerance.
One thing we haven't talked about so far, just came to mind, is deductibles. What's a typical deductible for policies like this?
Smaller policies, anything under $1 million, we're seeing 10,000, but 25,000 is starting to be the more norm. And then when we get over that $1 million to $2 million plus, 50 to 100,000 deductibles.
Yeah, I got you. Again, it's a function of the risk,
yep,
right? So if you can self-insure yourself, you're thinking, all right, I can afford up to 25,000. It's almost like another way of looking at this is also catastrophe insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
You want to protect yourself from the biggie.
Yeah, exactly.
The biggie, you come down, you lose a lot of money. It's not like, oh, yeah, my controller fell and got duped. We lost 10 grand. We wire transferred 10 grand. We'll eat that. Put the controls in place.
Right.
That's different than every one of our customers had their social security numbers compromised because we're a financial institution.
Yep.
It's like, oh crap,
yep,
we got ourselves a big deal here.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few other ones here. I want to start this process. What's adding the steps of adding cyber to my regular insurance? That's a great question. Typically, because I'm assuming you kind of offer full
lines, correct?
Full lines, right? So is it easier or harder when you've already been doing other lines of insurance?
Not necessarily. Actually, we write a lot of policies that we just do their cyber for the time being, and we look at the other side later. It starts with the application, and the application is pretty easy if you have an IT company. I think for me it's a little foreign, but when you have an IT company and you're working with them, it's just that application, and then we come up with some options. But standalone, we do not need to have the rest of your insurance to give you a quote by any means, no way. And
you just brought something to mind. This doesn't have to be like you got one shot at this. Is there an iterative process? Like we filled out the application to this degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Is there that kind of a process? Because this is a little bit more technical than your typical, let's just call it, fire insurance or building insurance. So
it's not as rigid. Yeah, it's not you have one-time shot at this, this or that. You answered this wrong, we're not covering it. No, not at all.
Or you change the answer because now that I understand what you're actually asking for.
And that happens a lot, honest, because sometimes we'll have, we talked about MFA, for example. That is just a general question on the regular application, and there's a supplemental that will specifically go into it. People inadvertently might answer things different, even though it's the same company, same person doing it. So we just have to get clarification. The beautiful thing with us is we're a broker, meaning we work with different carriers. So different carriers might have different prereqs based on just your industry. I might say, hey, this carrier just our Travelers may be a better fit than Hartford, and here's why. So we'll come up with some options. But no, it's never going to be a rigid, just this is all you got type deal.
Gotcha. Oh, so how does cyber insurance work if you use an outsourced third-party IT company to host your network? That's a great question.
So cyber insurance works. I mean, basically, you are the person, you are the client who's getting that information. For example, if I went to ABC grocery store, I gave them my credit card information and they got hacked. Me as the patron, I don't care if he has a third party or not. All I know is I gave you my information, you got hacked. I'm going to either sue you or you have to give me the credit monitoring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about that third party, it's really not going to affect the.
They don't ask that.
They're not going to ask like, oh, do you have an IT or is this stuff in place? Now they will add in the application and ask if you're using a provider, who it is, et cetera. But it's really going to come down to your controls. So.
Right. Kind of like the third-party policy thing, right? Which we work with companies all the time. We have companies which are SOC compliant.
Yeah.
And as the third-party provider, we're just the ones who are responsible for certain policies.
Right. Exactly.
Not all of them, because we're also not doing data entry. We're not the ones managing some of the secure data. We're just making sure that the plumbing works.
Yep. Exactly.
The IT plumbing works.
The IT plumbing. Yep.
One last question before we go. Many smaller companies don't currently have MFA in place. Are you able to advise what the average cost for a company to put MFA? MFA technologies are very cost effective, for sure. A couple, I don't know, maybe $3 a user per month to have a tool. The other cost is setting up the systems, right? Because now you have to enable systems to allow that. Make sure that the systems that you want to add MFA to. So there's usually, in our business, there's going to be some mini project work there to get it all set up. And then you have the time, you have to roll it out. I'll give an example. MFA being used for if you have MS365.
Okay.
That's almost a non-negotiable. If you're using MS365, you should have an MFA product in place. Because bad actors can take over your account and they don't even need to be in this country.
Right.
Is really what it comes out to. So the MFA helps protect you. So it's a pretty low cost solution to have in place. It's inconvenient. Sorry. A lot of these cyber things we have to put in place are going to be inconvenient for all of us. Because we've got bad guys who are trying to break into our houses all the time, and we got to protect ourselves. So unfortunately, it adds a little bit of overhead to your business,
right? To
have to add this, and then you're in the airport and you're trying to get your email, and you get this pop-up saying you want to validate that your email is you,
right?
And you're like, oh crap, is this me? Is this really what I didn't try to, I didn't change anything. You just want to be on top of it. So
makes sense.
I want to be conscious of everybody's time here, respectful of it. We're right at time. It's been great having this conversation, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Hopefully this is valuable to all of you. We'd love your feedback. Contact us. We'll send out an email after this with a link to the video, as well as any other contact information for Mike or myself. If there's any other follow-up questions or questions you have, like this is a crazy topic that keeps getting crazier and crazier, but you got a couple professionals here that are here for you if you need us. So
thank you guys so much. Appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Roger, we got a roll from Roger.